Emily Johnson sat at a small table in the corner of the local community center, her laptop open in front of her and a steaming cup of coffee cradled in her hands. She gazed out the window at the bustling street outside, watching people move purposefully, each focused on their own lives. A mix of excitement and apprehension swirled in her stomach as she thought about the job search that had consumed her thoughts over the past few weeks. Today was different, though. She could feel it. The air buzzed with potential. She had just received a call from a prominent tech entrepreneur, Alexander Pierce, who was seeking an occupational therapist for his son, Ethan. The moment she had heard his name, a shiver ran down her spine. It had been years since she had last seen Alexander, and the memories flooded back with a bittersweet intensity. They had shared a special bond in college, one that had been snuffed out when he chose to chase his ambitious dreams instead of nurturing their relationship. Emily had moved on, or at least she thought she had, but the thought of working with his son ignited feelings she thought she had buried deep. "What if it's not what I expect?" she whispered to herself, her fingers tapping nervously on the laptop keyboard. "What if I see him again?" The anticipation was almost unbearable. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing heart. This was about Ethan. After all, she had dedicated herself to helping children, especially those who struggled with communication. She had to focus on that, on the boy who needed her help, not the man who had broken her heart. Across town, in the sleek, glass-walled offices of Pierce Technologies, Alexander Pierce sat hunched over his desk, his brow furrowed in concentration. The demands of his job had always been high, but lately they felt insurmountable. His company was expanding rapidly, and with that success came an avalanche of responsibilities. Yet, as overwhelming as his work was, it paled in comparison to the challenges he faced at home with his son, Ethan. Ethan had been diagnosed with autism at a young age, and despite Alexander's best efforts, he struggled to communicate effectively. His heart ached every time he watched his son retreat into his own world, filled with silence and uncertainty. The decision to hire a new therapist felt like a last-ditch effort to bridge that gap. "I just want you to be happy, buddy," he murmured under his breath, glancing at the photograph of Ethan that sat on his desk. The boy's bright smile was a stark contrast to the emptiness that sometimes filled their home. As he scrolled through the profiles of potential therapists, Alexander felt a flicker of hope. He had read Emily Johnson's credentials and was impressed. She specialized in music therapy, a field he believed might resonate with Ethan. He remembered how music had always been a part of their lives, a connection that could transcend the barriers of communication. This could be the key, he thought, determination flooding through him. Alexander picked up his phone and dialed her number, ready to take the first step toward helping his son. Hours later, Emily arrived at the sprawling estate that was Alexander's home, her heart pounding in her chest as she parked her car in the driveway. The house was impressive, a modern marvel surrounded by meticulously landscaped gardens. She took a moment to compose herself, inhaling deeply to calm her nerves. "It's just a job," she reminded herself. "Focus on Ethan." But as she walked toward the front door, an inexplicable connection to the place made her heart race. The memories of laughter and whispered secrets echoed in her mind, memories that felt both distant and achingly close. The door swung open, and a friendly face greeted her. "Hi, you must be Emily. I'm Alexander's assistant, Sarah. Come in." Sarah stepped aside, and Emily entered the grand foyer, her eyes widening at the opulence around her. She followed Sarah down a long hallway, each step echoing in the silence of the house. "Ethan is in the playroom," Sarah explained, leading her toward a room filled with colorful toys and art supplies. "He loves music, so I think you'll have a great time with him." Emily nodded, her heart pounding as they approached the door. "Thank you for the warm welcome," she replied, trying to sound confident. As the door swung open, she was met with the sight of Ethan sitting on the floor, surrounded by a jumble of musical instruments. He looked up at her with wide eyes, a mixture of curiosity and apprehension reflected in his expression. "Hi, Ethan," Emily said softly, kneeling down to his level. "I'm here to play with you today." Ethan didn't respond verbally, but the way he studied her intently made her feel hopeful. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small ukulele, strumming a few gentle chords. "Do you like music?" she asked, watching for any sign of interest. Ethan's eyes lit up, and he reached out to touch the instrument with hesitant fingers. In that moment, Emily felt a rush of warmth and purpose. This was why she had chosen this path, to connect with children like Ethan, to help them find their voices through music. Unbeknownst to her, the door to the hallway creaked open slightly, and Alexander stood frozen in place, his breath catching in his throat. He hadn't expected to return home early and find his son engaged in a way he had never seen before. The sight of Emily, her hair cascading over her shoulders and her face lit up with joy, sent a jolt of recognition through him. Memories rushed back unbidden, of laughter, of dreams shared under starlit skies, of the moment he had let her go to chase a life he thought he wanted. "Who is she?" he thought, his heart racing. "Why does she look so familiar?" As Emily continued to strum the ukulele, Ethan began to hum along, his voice soft yet melodic. The sound filled the room, weaving a tapestry of hope that enveloped them all. Alexander's heart ached at the sight of his son finding joy, and he realized that the therapist was not just a stranger. She was the girl he had once loved. Just as quickly as the realization hit him, he stepped back, his mind swirling with confusion. "What do I do?" he thought, torn between the desire to confront the past and the need to protect his son. In that moment, Emily glanced up, feeling an inexplicable pull toward the doorway. Their eyes met, and time seemed to stand still. The music faded into the background as the weight of their shared history filled the air. Alexander's heart raced as he finally understood. This was no ordinary therapist. She was the one he had left behind, the one who had loved him despite his flaws. The connection between them was palpable, a thread that had never truly been severed. But as quickly as it had ignited, uncertainty washed over them both, leaving them to grapple with the implications of their encounter. Would they be able to confront their past, or would it remain an unspoken barrier between them? With Ethan's laughter ringing in her ears, Emily took a deep breath, ready to focus on the task at hand, even as the shadows of the past lingered just beyond reach. Emily sat cross-legged on the soft carpet of the expansive playroom, surrounded by a colorful array of musical instruments. The room was bright and airy, sunlight streaming through large windows adorned with sheer curtains that fluttered gently in the breeze. She had set up a small corner with a guitar, a keyboard, and a collection of percussion instruments. Today, she was determined to connect with Ethan through the universal language of music. "Okay, Ethan," she said gently, her voice warm and inviting. "Do you want to try playing some music with me? We can use these instruments to make some fun sounds together." Ethan, a shy 8-year-old with bright blue eyes and tousled brown hair, looked up at her with a hint of curiosity. He was usually reserved, preferring the company of his toys over people, but something about Emily's presence felt different. She exuded a comforting energy that made it easier for him to engage, even if only a little. Emily picked up a pair of maracas and shook them lightly, demonstrating how they created a rhythm. "Listen to this," she exclaimed, her excitement palpable. "We can make music and have a little dance party. Wouldn't that be fun?" To her surprise, Ethan tilted his head, a small smile forming on his lips. He reached for the maracas, his fingers brushing against hers as he took hold of them. Emily felt a thrill run through her. This was a breakthrough she hadn't anticipated. "That's it. Now you try," she encouraged, her heart racing with hope. Ethan shook the maracas tentatively at first, the sound timid and unsure. But with each subsequent shake, he seemed to find more confidence, the rhythm growing stronger and more assured. Emily clapped her hands in delight. "Yes, Ethan, you're doing amazing. Now, let's add some music to it." She turned to the keyboard and began to play a simple melody, a cheerful tune that filled the room with warmth. Ethan's eyes lit up. The sound of the keyboard seemed to awaken something within him, and he began to shake the maracas in time with her playing. The laughter that bubbled up from him was pure and unrestrained, echoing off the walls, and Emily couldn't help but join in, her own laughter mingling with his. This was a moment she had longed for, a connection, a shared experience. "You're a natural musician, Ethan. How about we try to make up a little song together?" As Emily spoke, Her heart swelled with joy. She could see Ethan relaxing, his body moving more freely, his laughter more frequent. They continued to play, the room filled with music and laughter, the sound wrapping around them like a warm blanket. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to both of them, Alexander stood just outside the door, his hand resting on the frame as he listened. He had returned home early, intending to check on Ethan and see how the new therapist was faring. The moment he heard the laughter and lively music spilling from the playroom, he paused, a mix of emotions flooding through him. For so long, their home had been engulfed in silence, punctuated only by the distant hum of his work or Ethan's occasional murmurs. The lively sounds now cascading into the hallway were an entirely new experience. It was a glimpse into a world he had not realized was possible for his son. Alexander leaned closer, peering through the crack in the door. His heart raced as he watched Emily and Ethan. Emily's face was lit with joy, her eyes sparkling as she encouraged Ethan, who was now giggling and moving to the rhythm. The sight was heartwarming, and Alexander felt a pang of something he couldn't quite identify. Was it longing, regret, or perhaps hope? "Come on, Ethan, let's try clapping our hands to the beat," Emily prompted. Ethan clapped along, his laughter ringing out once again. Alexander felt a smile creep onto his face, a rare moment of happiness amidst the chaos of his life. As the session continued, he couldn't help but admire Emily's patience and creativity. She had a way of connecting with Ethan that he had never witnessed before, and it filled him with a sense of pride for his son. For a brief moment, he allowed himself to forget about his responsibilities, the stress of his job, and the weight of his past decisions. He was merely a father, watching his son thrive. But just as he was about to step inside, he hesitated. Memories flooded back, of laughter shared with Emily, moments spent together, and the love they once had. The last time he had seen her, they had been young and hopeful, dreaming of a future together. Now, here she was, a woman transformed, and yet, in many ways, still the same. "Okay, let's try something new," Emily said, breaking through his reverie. "How about we create a song together? We can use words to express our feelings." "I'll help you, Ethan." Ethan nodded eagerly, his enthusiasm infectious. "Okay," he exclaimed, his voice bright and clear. Just as they began to brainstorm ideas for their song, Alexander felt an inexplicable urge to join them. He pushed the door open slightly, the hinges creaking softly. Emily turned at the sound, her eyes widening in shock as she met Alexander's gaze. Time seemed to freeze, the laughter in the room quieting to an awkward silence. Alexander stood there, the weight of their shared past pressing heavily on his chest. "Emily?" His voice was barely above a whisper, laden with disbelief and a hint of nostalgia. "Alex?" she replied, equally stunned. The sound of his name on her lips sent a jolt through him, awakening feelings he thought he had buried long ago. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air was thick with tension, memories swirling around them like ghosts. Emily's heart raced as she took in the sight of him. How he had changed, yet remained so familiar. The man she once loved stood before her, and yet, so much had happened since then. Ethan, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, looked between the two adults, confusion etched on his small face. "Who's Alex?" he asked, tilting his head slightly. Emily quickly knelt down to Ethan's level, her voice gentle. "Alex is someone I knew a long time ago. He's your dad's friend. Are you friends now?" Ethan inquired, his innocence cutting through the tension. Alexander managed a small smile, the corners of his mouth lifting ever so slightly. "I hope we can be, Ethan. It's been a long time." Emily could see the uncertainty in Alexander's eyes, the vulnerability that had replaced the confident man she had known. It was a reminder of how different they had both become, yet how much they still shared. "Would you like to join us?" Emily asked, her voice steady, trying to bridge the gap that lay between them. "We were just about to create a song together." Alexander hesitated, glancing at Ethan, who was still holding the maracas, waiting expectantly. The moment was fragile, and he felt the weight of their unspoken history pressing down on him. I'd like that," he finally replied, stepping further into the room. As he joined them, Emily's heart raced, caught between the joy of reconnecting with Ethan and the flood of memories that came with Alexander's presence. The music that had once brought them together now felt like a backdrop to their complicated emotions. "Let's make a song about family," Emily suggested, hoping to ease the tension. "We can all contribute something. How does that sound?" Ethan's eyes sparkled with excitement. "Yes, I want to sing about my family." As they began to brainstorm ideas, Emily felt a sense of hope unfurling within her. Perhaps this was a chance, not just for Ethan, but for all of them. The music could be a bridge, a way to reconnect and heal the wounds of the past. With each note and each word, they began to weave a melody that was as much about their present as it was about their shared history. In that moment, surrounded by laughter and music, Emily dared to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could find a way forward together. The air was thick with unspoken words as Alexander and Emily stood just feet apart, the memories of their past swirling around them like a gentle breeze, tugging at their hearts. The initial shock of seeing each other again was slowly subsiding, leaving a tentative warmth in its wake. Alexander cleared his throat, trying to dispel the tension that hung palpably in the room. "Emily," he began, his voice low and hesitant, "I didn't expect to see you here." He gestured vaguely, as if the expansive room could somehow encapsulate the enormity of their shared history. Emily, caught off guard by his directness, felt her heart race. "Neither did I, Alexander. It's been a long time." Her eyes darted around the room, landing on Ethan, who was still engrossed in the instruments, blissfully unaware of the storm of emotions brewing between his father and his new therapist. "College days, right?" Alexander continued, the corners of his mouth twitching into a half-smile. "I can't believe how much time has passed." "Yeah," Emily replied, a soft laugh escaping her lips. "I remember late nights in the library, cramming for exams and arguing about which coffee shop had the best espresso." A wistful smile tugged at her mouth, and she could see the flicker of recognition in Alexander's eyes. "Those were simpler times," he said, his tone reflective. "We had our whole lives ahead of us." The weight of those words hung heavy in the air. Emily could feel the unspoken feelings lingering between them, a mixture of nostalgia and regret. "Life has a way of taking us down different paths," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I often think about the choices I made," Alexander admitted, his gaze intense as he held her eyes. "Leaving everything behind to chase a dream. I didn't realize what I was sacrificing at the time." His honesty struck a chord in Emily's heart, and for a moment, they were both lost in the depths of their shared history. Before either of them could delve further into the past, Ethan looked up, breaking the spell. "Can we play the drums, Miss Emily?" His voice was bright and hopeful, cutting through the tension in the room. "Of course, Ethan," Emily replied, her face lighting up at his enthusiasm. "Let's get those drums set up." She turned away from Alexander, focusing on Ethan as she gathered the instruments. It was a small reprieve, but it allowed her to steady her racing heart. As they began to play together, Alexander leaned against the wall, watching his son with a mixture of pride and disbelief. He had never seen Ethan respond like this with anyone else before. The way Emily interacted with Ethan was different. It was as if she understood him in a way he hadn't thought possible. The music flowed freely between them, a dialogue that transcended spoken words. "See, Ethan?" Emily encouraged, her voice bright with excitement. "You're doing such a great job. Let's try a little faster now." She tapped the rhythm on her own lap, encouraging him to follow along. Ethan giggled, his eyes sparkling with joy. "I can do that. Watch me." He matched her tempo, the sound of the drums filling the room with a lively beat. For a moment, it felt as if the world outside had faded away, leaving only the music and the bond forming between them. Alexander felt a swell of emotion as he observed their interaction. He had always wished for Ethan to connect with others, to communicate his feelings in a way that made sense to him. And here was Emily, effortlessly breaking through the barriers that had kept Ethan isolated for so long. He found himself captivated, not just by the progress Ethan was making, but by the woman who was facilitating it. As the session continued, Alexander's heart ached with a strange mix of gratitude and guilt. He had been so focused on his career and the pressures of his life that he had overlooked what truly mattered, his son's happiness. And now, standing there watching Emily and Ethan, he realized just how much he had taken for granted. The session came to an end, and Emily packed away the instruments, her heart full from the connection she had forged with Ethan. Alexander stepped forward, breaking the silence that had settled after the music faded. "Emily, I can't thank you enough for today," he said, his voice earnest. "You've made an incredible difference in Ethan's life already." "It's really all him," she replied, a modest smile on her face. "He's so talented, and he responds so well to music. It's like it opens up a whole new world for him. Still, it takes a special person to bring that out of him," Alexander insisted, his gaze unwavering. "I can see how much he enjoys working with you. It's a relief." The sincerity in his voice made Emily's heart flutter. "I'm just doing my job, Alexander. I care about helping him, but it's more than that, isn't it?" He took a small step closer, the air between them crackling with tension. "You have a gift, Emily. You have a way of connecting with him that I can't explain." She held his gaze, a mixture of pride and vulnerability washing over her. "Thank you," she said softly. "That means a lot coming from you." Just then, Ethan piped up, oblivious to the deeper conversation unfolding around him. "Can we do this again tomorrow, Miss Emily? I want to play the drums some more." "Absolutely," Emily replied, her heart swelling at his excitement. "We'll make music every day if you want to." As Ethan bounced on his toes, eager for the next session, Alexander felt a pang of regret hit him once more. He had missed so much of his son's life. The thought of losing more time was unbearable. "Emily," he began again, his voice more resolute this time, "can we talk more? About Ethan, about what we can do to help him?" "Of course," she said, her professional demeanor returning as she adjusted the materials in her bag. "I believe we can create a structured plan that incorporates music therapy into his routine. It could really help him communicate better." "Let's sit down and go over everything," Alexander suggested, his eyes brightening with determination. "I want to be involved, to understand what Ethan needs." As they moved toward the door, the connection between them felt stronger, yet the path ahead was still clouded with uncertainties. They shared a glance, an understanding that things were beginning to shift, but the ghosts of their past lingered just beneath the surface. "Tomorrow, then?" Alexander asked, opening the door for her as they stepped into the soft golden light of the setting sun. "Tomorrow," Emily confirmed, her heart racing at the thought of seeing him again. As they parted ways, the air crackled with possibilities, and for the first time in a long time, both felt a flicker of hope igniting in their hearts. Their shared journey was just beginning, woven together by the laughter of a child and the rhythm of music, a melody that promised healing and connection. As Emily walked to her car, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a professional engagement. It was a chance to rediscover not just her passion for helping Ethan, but perhaps even the love that had once brought her and Alexander together. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm golden hue over Alexander's sprawling home. Inside, the atmosphere buzzed with a mix of anticipation and nervousness as he prepared for dinner with Emily. He had extended the invitation as a gesture of gratitude, but beneath that, it was also a chance to reconnect with the woman he once loved. He paced in the kitchen, glancing at the clock, counting down the minutes until she arrived. Emily, having finished her session with Ethan, walked through the door with a small smile that lit up her face. Alexander's heart skipped a beat as he took in her presence. She seemed both familiar and foreign after all these years. She wore a simple yet elegant dress that swayed gently with her movements, reminding him of the girl he fell in love with in college. "Hey, thanks for coming," Alexander said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Thanks for inviting me," Emily replied, her cheeks slightly flushed as she entered the dining area. The table was set with care, each place adorned with a neatly folded napkin and a flickering candle that cast soft shadows on the walls. Ethan bounded into the room, his excitement palpable. "Emily, look what I made." He held up a crayon drawing of a sun with a smiley face. That's amazing, Ethan, Emily exclaimed, crouching down to get a closer look at the artwork. Her eyes sparkled with genuine delight, and Alexander felt a wave of warmth wash over him. She seemed to effortlessly connect with Ethan, and he found himself mesmerized by the bond they were forging. As they settled into dinner, the initial awkwardness began to dissipate. Emily and Alexander exchanged glances across the table, their eyes speaking volumes of unvoiced memories and feelings. The conversation flowed, punctuated by Ethan's innocent interjections, which often turned their serious topics into light-hearted moments. "Do you remember that time we tried to build a treehouse?" Alexander asked, a hint of nostalgia in his voice. Emily laughed, the sound like music in the air. "You mean the one that collapsed before we could even climb into it? I think we ended up just sitting on the porch eating sandwiches instead." "Hey, that was a great sandwich," Alexander defended, a playful smile breaking across his face. Ethan giggled, his laughter infectious. "Can we build a treehouse, too? I want one." "Maybe one day, buddy," Alexander replied, ruffling Ethan's hair. He glanced at Emily, who was watching him with a soft expression that made his heart thrum. As the evening progressed, they shared more stories, reminiscing about college antics, late-night study sessions, and the dreams they once had. But as they laughed and shared, there was an undercurrent of tension that neither of them could ignore. The unspoken words and unresolved feelings hung heavily in the air. After dessert, Emily hesitated, glancing towards the window where the last rays of sunlight were fading. "You know, after you left, I struggled for a long time. I tried to move on, but it was hard," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. Alexander's heart sank at her words. He could feel the weight of his past mistakes pressing down on him. "I'm sorry, Emily. I never wanted to hurt you. I thought I was doing the right thing, chasing my dreams, but I didn't realize what I was sacrificing." His voice cracked, revealing the vulnerability he had kept buried for so long. Emily looked at him, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "I thought we had a future together, Alexander. When you left, it felt like everything I believed in crumbled. I wanted to support you, but it felt like I was just a chapter in your story that you were done with. I didn't see it that way. I thought I could come back for you once I achieved what I wanted, but by then, I'd lost sight of what really mattered," he admitted, his gaze falling to the table as he wrestled with his emotions. Ethan, sensing the change in the atmosphere, shifted in his chair. "Are you too sad? Because I can sing a happy song." "No, Ethan, we're okay," Emily replied quickly, her smile returning as she looked at him. "But a happy song sounds like a great idea. Yeah, let's make a song together." Ethan clapped his hands excitedly. As the child's enthusiasm filled the room, Emily and Alexander exchanged a glance that spoke volumes. They both knew that despite the heaviness of their conversation, there was a flicker of hope in the air. Their connection was undeniable, reignited by shared laughter and cherished moments. They moved to the living room, where Ethan began strumming on a small guitar Emily had brought for their sessions. The sound was a bit clumsy, but it was filled with genuine passion. Emily joined in, her voice harmonizing with Ethan's awkward yet joyful melody. "See, this is how we create happiness." Ethan beamed, his face lighting up as they sang together. Emily watched him with admiration, her heart swelling with pride at the way he expressed himself through music. As Alexander listened, he felt a pang of longing. He wanted to be part of this joy, to share in the love that was blossoming before him. But as he watched Emily and Ethan, he couldn't shake the guilt that gnawed at him. He had missed so much of Ethan's life, and now he feared he might lose Emily again. Just as they wrapped up their impromptu performance, the moment shifted. Emily's laughter echoed through the room, and Alexander found himself captivated by her smile. It was a smile he had missed for so long. They were both caught up in the warmth of the moment when suddenly, Ethan interrupted. "Mommy!" he exclaimed, looking wide-eyed at the both of them. The word hung in the air, a reminder of the family they could have been if things had gone differently. Emily froze, her eyes widening slightly. Alexander felt his heart drop. "Ethan, Before he could finish, Ethan leapt up and dashed out of the room, his small feet pattering against the hardwood floor. The tension that had been temporarily lifted crashed back down. Emily's face paled as she turned to Alexander, the unspoken words hanging heavily between them. I didn't mean to, No, it's okay, Alexander replied, his voice soft but firm. It's just a lot to process. Right? She said, her voice trembling slightly. I didn't mean to imply anything. I care about him, and I care about you. The vulnerability of the moment made them both acutely aware of their emotions. The walls they had built around their hearts began to crack, but the sudden interruption had thrown them off balance. Maybe we should Emily started, but the sentence hung unfinished in the air. I don't want to rush this, Emily. I don't want to lose you again, Alexander admitted, his eyes searching hers. Just then, Ethan returned, his face filled with excitement. Can we make cookies now? I want to bake with you both. Emily's expression shifted back to one of warmth and joy. Cookies sound like a perfect idea, Ethan, she exclaimed, her eyes sparkling once more. As they moved to the kitchen, the moment that had almost changed everything slipped away. But both Alexander and Emily felt the lingering connection, the possibility that lay just beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to break free. And as they baked cookies, laughter filling the air once more, they both knew that the story between them was far from over. Emily Johnson stood in the spacious playroom that had become her sanctuary. The walls were adorned with colorful artwork, a testament to Ethan's blossoming creativity, and the sun streamed through the large windows, casting a warm glow over the room. Today, as she set up her musical instruments, she felt a familiar tug at her heart, a blend of joy and trepidation. The laughter and excitement she shared with Ethan during their sessions were like a balm for her soul. Yet the presence of his father, Alexander Pierce, loomed large in her mind, complicating her emotions. Ethan, how about we start with the drums today? Emily suggested, her voice bright and encouraging. Ethan's face lit up, and he nodded enthusiastically, his dark curls bouncing with the motion. She handed him a pair of drumsticks, and he immediately began tapping on the floor with an infectious rhythm that made her smile. Great job. Now, let's add some clapping, she said, joining him. They created an impromptu beat together, and soon, their laughter filled the air, drowning out the whispers of Emily's uncertainty about her feelings for Alexander. She cherished these moments with Ethan, where music became a bridge for communication, allowing him to express joys and frustrations he often kept locked inside. Meanwhile, Alexander observed from the doorway, his heart swelling with pride and admiration. He had initially hired Emily out of desperation, hoping to find someone who could reach his son in ways he could not. But what he witnessed now was far beyond his expectations. Emily had a gift, an innate ability to connect with Ethan that felt almost magical. He took a step forward, unable to resist the urge to watch their bond unfold. As he entered the room, the sound of laughter faded, and both Ethan and Emily turned to face him. Ethan smiled, his eyes sparkling with mischief, while Emily's expression shifted to one of surprise and unease. The air thickened with unspoken words and unresolved feelings. Hey, I didn't mean to interrupt, Alexander said, forcing a casual tone despite the tension. I just wanted to see how the session was going. It's going well, Emily replied, her voice steady but her heart racing. Ethan is really responding to the music today. Ethan beamed, proud of his accomplishment. Drums, he exclaimed, holding up the sticks like trophies. Alexander knelt beside Ethan, his heart softening at the sight of his son's enthusiasm. I can hear that. Sounds like you're a natural. Maybe you'll be the next rock star, he teased, ruffling Ethan's hair. Maybe, Ethan replied, giggling, before returning his attention to Emily. Can we add the guitar next? Absolutely, Emily said, her smile genuine. Let's create a whole band. As they resumed their session, Alexander found himself captivated not just by Ethan's joy, but by the way Emily guided him. It was clear she had a profound understanding of his son's world, and for the first time since he had reconnected with her, he began to see the depth of her talent and the strength of her spirit. Later, as the session wrapped up, Alexander found a moment alone with Emily. The playroom, once a vibrant hub of activity, now felt quiet, almost intimate. "You're incredible with him," he said, his voice low and sincere. Emily met his gaze, the warmth of his compliment igniting a flicker of the feelings she had buried deep. "Thank you, Alexander. It's easy to connect with him. He's special." "Special indeed," he agreed, his eyes searching hers. "You've made such a difference in his life." A silence hung between them, thick with memories and what-ifs. Emily felt the weight of their shared past pressing against her, and despite the warmth of the room, a chill ran through her. She took a breath, steeling herself against the swell of emotion. "I'm just doing my job." "But it's more than that," Alexander countered, stepping a little closer. "You've brought joy back into our home. I can't thank you enough for that." As his words settled, Emily felt a rush of vulnerability. She wanted to tell him how she felt, how much she had missed him, and how their paths had diverged in ways she never wanted. But the fear of opening old wounds held her back. "I just want what's best for Ethan," she said instead, her voice barely above a whisper. "Of course," Alexander replied, his brow furrowing. "But what about you? What do you want?" The question hung in the air, and Emily's heart raced. She wanted to say that she wanted him, that she still loved him despite the years and the hurt. But the reality of her situation rushed back, reminding her of the boundaries she had to maintain as his son's therapist. "Alexander, she started. But before she could finish, Ethan bounded back into the room, his energy infectious. "Can we play again?" he asked, his eyes wide with excitement. "Of course, buddy," Alexander replied, a smile breaking through his earlier tension. He turned to Emily, the moment lost but the feelings still palpable. "Let's do it." As they transitioned back into their playful rhythm, Emily felt torn between her professional role and the undeniable attraction she had for Alexander. Each laugh from Ethan felt like a reminder of what could have been, and yet, their shared moments were also a glimpse of a future she dared not imagine. Days turned into a week, and Emily found herself falling deeper into the rhythm of her new life. As she continued her sessions with Ethan, Alexander made a conscious effort to be present, often joining them for parts of the activities. They created an environment that felt almost familial, laughter echoing in the hallways of Alexander's grand home. "Emily, can you show me how to play that?" Alexander asked one afternoon, nodding toward the guitar. His enthusiasm was genuine, and Emily felt a thrill at the thought of teaching him. "Sure. It's fun," she replied, her nerves easing as they sat side by side. She guided his hands over the strings, their fingers brushing against each other. The contact sent a shiver down her spine, and for a moment, she forgot about the complexities of their situation. "You have a good ear," she said, watching him strum a few notes. "With practice, you'll be jamming with Ethan in no time." "I'll hold you to that," Alexander said, his eyes sparkling with a mix of challenge and admiration. The warmth between them felt like a delicate thread, fragile yet undeniably present. As the days passed, the bond between the three of them grew, but Emily couldn't shake off the feeling of unresolved tension with Alexander. Their conversations had shifted from awkward to comfortable, but the deeper emotions still lurked beneath the surface. Would it be possible to love him again after everything? One evening, after a particularly joyful session, Emily found herself sitting on the porch steps, lost in thought. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. It was a beautiful sight, but her mind was elsewhere. She was startled when she heard footsteps behind her. "Mind if I join you?" Alexander asked, his voice warm and inviting. "Not at all," she replied, gesturing for him to sit beside her. They sat in silence for a moment, the world around them growing quiet as the stars began to twinkle in the night sky. "Do you ever think about what could have been?" he asked suddenly, his tone contemplative. Emily's heart raced at his words. "All the time," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I also think about what we have now. It's different." "Different isn't bad," he said softly, turning to face her. "Sometimes it's just a new beginning." She looked into his eyes, and for a moment, the weight of their past seemed to lift. "But what does that mean for us? I'm here for Ethan, and I don't want to complicate things." "Emily, I don't want to complicate things either," he replied, his expression earnest. But I can't deny that I feel something when I'm with you. Our history is complicated, but what if we could create something new? Emily felt a rush of hope and fear intertwine within her. Could they really navigate this new chapter together? The thought both thrilled and terrified her. Just then, Ethan burst through the door, his laughter echoing into the night, and the moment slipped away once more. "Mom, Dad, come help me with the stars," he called, his voice full of excitement. As they turned to follow their son, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that life had more in store for them, but uncertainty lingered in her heart like a shadow. She walked into the house, feeling the weight of choices yet to be made, her heart open to possibilities, yet guarded against the pain of the past. As the morning sun spilled through the large windows of Alexander's home, casting a warm glow over the spacious living room, Emily Johnson prepared for another session with Ethan. Today felt different. There was an electricity in the air, a sense of anticipation that made her pulse race. She set out a variety of musical instruments, hoping to build on the progress they had made in recent weeks. Ethan had shown remarkable improvement in expressing himself through music, and Emily was eager to see what new heights they could reach together. "Okay, buddy," she said, kneeling beside the array of instruments. "What do you feel like playing today?" She glanced up to see Ethan, who was sitting cross-legged on the floor, his brow furrowed in concentration. He had been quiet lately, and Emily wondered what thoughts were swirling in his mind. Ethan picked up a small xylophone, his fingers brushing over the colorful bars. He struck a few notes, each sound resonating through the room, a beautiful yet tentative introduction to what was to come. Emily smiled encouragingly. "That sounds great. Do you want to make a song together?" He nodded, his eyes lighting up with a mix of excitement and apprehension. As they began to play, Emily felt a connection forming, not just with Ethan but also with the very essence of music itself. It was a language that transcended words, a means of communication that allowed Ethan to express feelings that he often struggled to articulate. "Let's make it about something important," Emily suggested, her voice gentle and inviting. "What do you want to sing about today?" Ethan paused, his fingers stilling on the xylophone as he stared at the ground. After a moment, he took a deep breath and began to sing softly, his voice barely above a whisper. The lyrics he created were simple yet poignant, touching upon themes of love, loss, and longing, feelings he had absorbed from the world around him, from the absence of his mother and the silence that often enveloped their home. Emily's heart ached as she listened, her eyes brimming with tears. She could feel the weight of Ethan's words, the raw vulnerability of his expression. "Ethan, that's beautiful," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Can you sing it a little louder for me?" With her encouragement, Ethan's voice grew stronger, and Emily joined in, harmonizing softly. The melody wrapped around them like a warm blanket, creating a safe space where unspoken emotions could flow freely. Alexander, who had been working in his home office, was drawn by the sound of their voices. He stood in the doorway, captivated by the scene unfolding before him. The bond between Emily and Ethan was palpable, a testament to the healing power of music. As the final notes faded into silence, Alexander felt a lump form in his throat. The sight of Emily, her face glowing with pride, and Ethan, his eyes shining with joy, struck a deep chord within him. He stepped into the room, clapping slowly, a tear escaping the corner of his eye. "That was incredible, Ethan. You've really found your voice." Ethan beamed, clearly pleased with the praise, while Emily looked up, her heart racing at the sight of Alexander. "Thank you," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. The air between them crackled with unspoken words, memories of shared laughter and love flooding back. Just as they began to settle into a comfortable silence, Ethan, oblivious to the tension between the adults, spoke up. "Can we make more songs? Like a family?" His innocent question hung in the air like a fragile bubble, a reminder of the familial bond they all yearned for but had yet to fully realize. Emily exchanged a glance with Alexander, her heart fluttering at the thought. "Of course we can," she replied, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "We can make as many songs as you want." As the session continued, Emily felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her. The connection she had formed with Ethan was profound, yet it was Alexander's presence that complicated things. She could feel the unresolved feelings swirling between them, a potent mix of nostalgia and regret. Later that evening, as they prepared to leave, Emily's phone buzzed with a message. It was from her sister, Sarah, who had been distant lately. The message read, "We need to talk. I have something important to share." A knot tightened in Emily's stomach as she wondered what could be so urgent. "Everything okay?" Alexander asked, noticing the shift in her demeanor. "Just a message from my sister," Emily replied, forcing a smile. "She wants to talk." "About what?" Alexander pressed gently, concern etched across his face. "I'm not sure," Emily admitted, her brow furrowing, "but it feels serious." The following day, as they gathered for another session, Emily's mind was preoccupied with her sister's message. Ethan was excited, eager to dive into their music therapy, but Emily found it hard to focus. She was torn between the joy of working with Ethan and the looming uncertainty of her family. As they played together, Ethan suddenly paused, his expression shifting from joy to contemplation. "Emily," he said, his small voice breaking through her thoughts, "can I ask you something?" "Of course, Ethan. What's on your mind?" she replied, kneeling beside him. "Why does it feel like there's a secret between you and my dad?" he asked, his innocence cutting through the air like a knife. "Sometimes you look at him like you want to hug him, but then you look away." Emily's heart sank. She glanced at Alexander, who was standing a few feet away, his expression unreadable. "It's complicated," she explained gently. "Sometimes adults have feelings that are hard to understand. But I don't want secrets," Ethan insisted, his brow furrowing in confusion. "Secrets hurt." At that moment, Emily realized how much Ethan was aware of the emotional landscape around him. "You're right," she said softly. "Secrets can hurt. It's important to be honest and talk about how we feel." Before she could say more, her phone buzzed again. It was another message from Sarah, and she felt a sinking feeling in her stomach. "I need to take this," she said, stepping outside for a moment. As she read the message, her heart raced. "Emily, you won't believe what I found out about our family. It's about Ethan and Alexander." Her hands trembled as she typed a reply, urging Sarah to call her immediately. When she returned inside, she found Alexander and Ethan laughing together, a moment of pure joy that made her heart ache. But the weight of her sister's revelations loomed over her, and she knew the truth would change everything. "Is everything okay?" Alexander asked, concern etching his features once more. I need to talk to you," Emily said, her voice shaky. "About Ethan. About us." Ethan looked between them, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. "Can we sing first?" he suggested, eager to return to their earlier happiness. Emily and Alexander exchanged a glance, a silent understanding passing between them. "Yes, let's sing," Emily said, though her heart was heavy with the knowledge of what was to come. As they began to play, Emily felt a mixture of gratitude and dread. The music flowed around them, a bittersweet melody that echoed the complexities of their lives. But deep down, she knew that whatever secrets lay ahead, they could only move forward by confronting them together. The love they felt for each other and for Ethan had the power to heal, to accept, and to forge a new beginning. If you enjoyed this heartwarming story about overcoming challenges and family love, don't forget to like the video, comment on what touched you the most, and subscribe to the channel. Stay tuned for our next exciting story.